so many questions that they might not even fit in here. But I am curious, Donald. First of all, what do you like to go by? Should I call you Donald or Donnie or Don or something else entirely?
Yeah, Donald usually.
Okay.
Yeah, so Donald's fine. Yeah,
So
I never really picked up I never really picked up an abbreviation for it.
yeah.
Although I think there's quite a few going around. Donnie is kind of I'll get called Donnie sometimes if I go to the Highlands with my cousins and so on.
I
Because
see.
Donnie is kind of a sort of a pervasive abbreviation for Donald in the Highlands for some reason. But yeah, no, Donald's fine.
Okay. So we've got a Scotsman here named Donald, and we've got an American named James. All we need is an Irishman named Sean, and we'll have all the all the most common names from our respective countries, huh?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it actually does occur to me that for my friends listening to this, when they go to look up your work, they might want to make sure that they're looking for Donald WG Lindsay, because you're not the only Donald Lindsay who exists in the small piping world.
Absolutely, yes. So there's WG. Now, I did, when I was young, release one album without the WG. And then on discovering that I'd gotten into the long grass, if you like, James, as you pointed out, there's more than one piping Donald Lindsay.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this is to do with the fact that Donald is kind of one of the Lindsay names, if you like. It seems to be, but I don't know what this is. What this has arisen from.
Yeah.
But I very quickly decided that it would be easier to call myself using my middle initials, because I think Ian Morrison's and John Morrison's and so on have this problem on the pipes, and have
Yeah,
had it
that
for a
makes
long
sense.
time.
Yeah.
And they solve it either by, if they enter competitions or whatever, using their town of origin, or using middle initials. So you see middle initials, pipers using middle initials here and there, and it's to do with this. And I know that Donald F. Lindsay, who is the most famous, I think, piping Donald Lindsay in the eastern United States, I think he was was he not the first overseas competitor to win at least certain of the major prizes in Scotland? And so some of his students have contacted me, and no doubt some of people looking for information about the chanter have contacted him. So
Sure,
I
yeah.
know that he's gone on to using his middle initial as well, F.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
so
you
there's
drove
Donald
him to
F.
it to some degree, huh?
Possibly, yeah. So yeah, totally. So there's Donald F, Donald WG, and I think probably other Donalds as well,
Yeah.
Donald Lindsay's. But yeah, like I say, that's the best way to find what I'm up to at the moment, is to stick with the WG.
Yeah.
Because it saves any confusion.
Yeah. And so when people are looking around for you, I know, so the way that I came across you and your work was through the Lindsay System chanter, and from there I learned about
Yeah.
the additional instruments you've worked on, and from there I've learned about the recordings you've done. What do you think that
Yeah,
you're
that's right.
best known for? Is that the path most people come by to learn about you? Is they come to the chanter and then find out more, or do people find you other ways as well?
Yes. Well, until last year, I would have, if you'd asked me that in September last year, I would have said undoubtedly. The only thing that really has caused people to be widely aware of me in the piping world has been the Lindsay System chanter, and the work that I've done with that. But from October last year, we released an album that I recorded before leaving Glasgow in 2019. And it's a bit of a departure. It's an interesting one. It's an experimental kind of ambient kind of, if you're into kind of Brian Eno or whatever, the kind of territory we're coming from. It's an album called The History of Sleep, and that's been all over the BBC in its own small way. I think we got played on BBC Three, BBC Radio 3, Radio 4, the World Service, Radio Scotland, and Radio Ulster. There was interviews on Radio Ulster and Radio 4 Today programme, which is, I think that's the second highest listened breakfast programme in the UK. So this was all a bit of a surprise. We really didn't, myself and my friend Richard, who made the album with me.
He's the one who's on guitar, right?
Yeah, he's playing the Rickenbacker. So it's electric guitar and small pipes. And we, apart from we played Dorrington, the Dixon tune. And apart from that, the rest of the album is fairly spontaneous improvisation between Richard and myself, which is something that I've had a long habit of doing this. Improvisation and improvisation on the pipes of that sort has been something that I would say has been a core part of the process of developing the chanter. And that was one of the reasons why I was so motivated to make it the first recording that we would release. Where the first substantial recording that we would release featuring the new chanter, because so we've got this strong element tradition there with Dorrington, but this free improvisation, which, as I say, has been and continues to be a core part of the way that I've developed the instrument alongside the traditional music. Now, having said that, the next thing on my agenda, if you like, is to make an album of traditional tunes. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be working with my friend Alistair Roberts, who's a traditional singer, fingerstyle guitarist, and doing that. And that's going to be the other side, if you like. You have the improvisation there that essentially drives and explores the chanter. And then the traditional tunes, the melodies, jigs and reels and all the rest of it, that really it's reaching for, if you like.
Yeah.
The tunes that were out with the range until the design was settled.
Yeah. So now that's exciting to me. So when you talk about this new album with more traditional tunes on it, you're speaking of traditional tunes that usually would not be within reach for a Highland pipe or small pipe scale.
Yes, that's right.
So this is exciting, and some of my friends who are listening might not be familiar with the Lindsay system chanter. So maybe we take just a moment to talk about it. But I do want to say, Donald, that this is really, if I had to sum up what I love about your work, it's exactly this. You focus on that album, History of Sleep. You talk about that last tune, Dorrington, and you mentioned that this tune was played by the Allen Pipers, in the 1700s. This is an old traditional tune. But it's being done in this very new way. I love this. I feel like you could have a person who maybe goes too far on one side who says, tradition is tradition. We ought never change it. The way the McCrimmons did it is perfect and it can never be better. You could have someone who goes the opposite direction who says, throw tradition out the window. I'm going to do something completely new. But when you bring the two together, I love that. I love this mix of the two, the futuristic and the established historical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very powerful. And I think it's very much, obviously I've been away from home for a year and a half now, but it's very much kind of how would I say it, sort of the moment, if you like, with what's happening in Glasgow just now with, not only within the kind of trad, within trad circles, there is a very dynamic thing happening. There's some musicians that I could recommend you check out to kind of understand the context that I'm coming out of with both with History of Sleep and also with this new album that we're planning just now. I'm thinking some of your listeners may not be familiar with these artists. So the first one, obviously, is Alistair Roberts. I don't know, have you listened to Alistair's stuff, James?
I'm not sure if I have. I try to watch some sort of trad scene videos on YouTube and stuff like that, but I'm not very well read in it, so I may well not have.
No, that's what I'm thinking. But pipers generally, I know, because obviously being a piper myself, we're a species unto ourselves, and we're not always plugged into kind of wider trad music that firmly.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of normal for pipers, I guess, because we're into our own thing and we're into the pipes basically.
Well, and I could be wrong, but it might be even more exacerbated by I'm way over on the west half of the United States, and of course the internet kind of bridges the Atlantic, but not always entirely. So we might be even more isolated in that way.
Yeah, and it all ends up, because the internet's so stuffed with interesting stuff now. It all ends up being about leads that you end up following and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so basically, first of all, Alistair Alasdair, so he spells his name, Roberts. And Alistair's been active since now. We had just left school. I think it was 1996 or thereabouts. Alistair picked up completely, out of the blue, a record deal with a Chicago label, Drag City, and he's been recording since then. He's still with them, and alternating more or less albums of original folk songs with albums of traditional ballads and old Scots songs and so on. And I've recorded on here and there on Alistair's albums on instruments as diverse as the Hungarian bagpipes and the uilleann pipes, and instruments. Sometimes Alistair's quite experimental, and sometimes it's just been an instrument that I've been experimenting with more or less. But yeah, so we've been on and off doing stuff together since those early days. But I've very much been in the pipes sort of zone, and Alistair's been over in the kind of folk music zone, which even in Scotland as well are kind of separate universes, separate bubbles really, that overlap for sure, but that are to a large extent separate as well. So that's one musician that be well worth checking out to understand, where this is all coming from. And now, if you also look up Bird Ellen, Burdellen, that's Debbie Armour. She's a fantastic singer, and some of the stuff she's been doing recently with traditional song as well is very interesting. That's a start. And Richard Youngs, who I played with as well. Check out Richard's stuff. Richard has been recording since the 80s, I think. He's from Cambridgeshire, but he's been a very long time part of the Glasgow scene. And Richard is just uncategorizable. He's into everything. He has a go at everything, and he's released about 140 albums so far. Some of them are just, I actually think the number is probably far higher than that, because some of them are just albums that he sticks out on Bandcamp and then gets on with the next thing. But he's a very interesting character. And then also Paul Barron, Paul I spell as normal, so I'm spelling names out for you now when I don't need to. Paul Barron, B-A-R-A-N, Paul Barron, B-A-R-A-N. And Paul, his output's not been as prolific as Richard's, but Paul, for a long time, has been a favourite guy of mine to improvise with, and we haven't recorded very much together. We have done a couple of tracks on an album that Paul's working on just now, but we've done a lot of spots in places in Glasgow, like the Old Hairdressers and the Glad Cafe and the Sharmanka Gallery. Now, I don't know, James, if you saw the first article way back in January 2018 in Piping Today about the Chanter project, when it was still the coloured set.
Oh, well, I came across it after that article had come out. I did see the article. Not when it was current. I was probably 6 or 7 months after it had already come out.
Yeah, the pictures in that article, which I think are brilliant, they're taken by John Slavin, who's the features editor of Piping Today.
I love those bright colours.
So I think it's mothballed just now. Oh yeah, it's great. And the funny sculptures and everything there, that's the Sharmanka Gallery. That's one of the venues when I'm home that we play in when we're playing, particularly when we're playing the kind of music that we've got in History of Sleep. We're blending that kind of improvisation and so on. That's a great place to play. And those sculptures that you see in the photographs, they actually come to life. There's a guy, John Kavanagh, who's a DJ on Radio 6 International, amongst many other things, which is a Glasgow independent radio, and he's a curator at the Sharmanka Gallery, and he'll sit in the booth in the Sharmanka Gallery. It's a load of mechanical sculptures made by a Russian sculptor.
I see.
And for shame, I can't remember the guy's name now, but he's a brilliant sculptor, and these sculptures all come to life. There's a kind of a control room there where you can press any button and they all start to activate. So it's kind of interesting.
Do they bring them to life
environment to play in? Yeah, and we
Yeah.
play off it a little bit.
Huh.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. It's really fun.
Now I
So
remember.
that's
I remember not too long ago you did you were doing something with a chanter where you'd put like some optical sensors into it, and was it
yes,
with some of these
absolutely.
same folks that you were doing those kinds of shows as well?
It was, yes, absolutely, and particularly with Paul, that I was using that optical chanter, and that's something that it's something I really want to get back into. That because I had that prototype working until we left to come here, and then I left it at home because I thought the travel will probably destroy it.
Oh yeah.
Because it's a very fragile. It's got all its wires on the outside and everything. But one of the things I said to myself I'll have the time to do when I'm out here is to put together an integrated version of that optical chanter so that the wires run within the walls of the chanter, which
Sure.
shouldn't be too difficult to do.
Though honestly, it looks kind of cool the way you had it, with the wires all over.
Yeah,
probably
really
probably a bit
I
more
love
delicate, but it does look cool.
Yeah, it does. And it's funny because when, some of the playing that we've done with it has been with modular synth and so on, and it really does look at home in that kind of environment. It's like
it
a
really
miniature.
does, yeah.
It looks like a mini, modular with all the wee wires going everywhere. And I can actually, with the breadboard on the front, I can actually take a wire and I can put it to route it. Because I've got a little, it's just a little op-amp chip on that breadboard. And so I can move a wire so that it goes through the amp or it doesn't, and things like that. And I always thought I could do a lot more with that. So yeah, I mean, it's a thought, and it's quite possible that I might, for myself, I might just continue using one that has a breadboard there.
Yeah.
Maybe with a little cover over it so that I can take the cover off to change the wire.
Oh yeah.
Or something like that. But no, it really does increase the kind of it broadens your options. It really does, and theoretically, if you've got a breadboard there, you can really just make up any sort of amplification or even effects circuit on that, and play with the output in that way. But yeah, one of the things we were doing was running it through the modular as well, which is really fun. And I remember that was how, in fact, that I discovered that the first photo transistor I was using wasn't up to the job, because I was playing in the Old Hairdressers, which is a great venue in Glasgow for improv. And the guy I was playing with, Luke Fowler, who's an artist, he's actually worth looking up himself. Luke Fowler, he turned to me and he said during the sound check, he said, I'm not getting very much above 4 kilohertz from this. That was basically, I just hashed it together and taken it over for this gig. So I was like, I knew it sounded a bit odd, but I said, is it just gated? Is there just a ceiling at 4 kilohertz? It's like, yeah. So I went home and I read in more detail the spec of the photo transistor I was using, and I realized that although on paper it seemed like it was capable of picking up to 20 kilohertz, it was clearly, it wasn't in practice managing to be as fast as that. So I went and I looked and I found a photo transistor that was capable of picking up. It was the only one I could find actually that was that fast, and I forget what the rise and fall time was, but it was something really quite nippy. And I realized that I needed to use a component that was spec'd for a much higher frequency, and so I put that in, and I found that I was getting it was picking up to 20 kilohertz, probably beyond, and that's the one I'm using now. But like I say, I've left that prototype at home, so I've got more work to do there. But I've worked out how, shortly before we left home, I've worked out how to use an optical pickup in the drones as well. So
gotcha.
it's totally different. The tongue on the drone needs to be reflective and flat, like on an easy drone or whatever, or any flat tongue drone.
Most
read.
synthetic drones, right? Yeah.
Yeah, most synthetic drone reads will do it. I think a cane drone read might struggle, but I might be wrong about that. It might be a little bit quieter because of the curved surface.
You just paint it with some reflective nail polish or something. Paint the tongue. Maybe then that would do it, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if you stuck a bit of foil to it or something.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Anything like that, then it would probably increase the increase its reflectivity, and then it would pick up a little better. So yeah, it's fun to experiment with. But yeah, I would love to have an integrated set put together with with optical chanters in various keys and so on, and optical drones as well. A nice set of maybe 6 optical drones. These are some of the kind of daydreams that I have to work on just now.
The next iterations of the dreaming pipes, huh? The dream
Oh,
goes
totally,
on,
yeah. Yeah, it does, yeah. It definitely does. Tunable as well. That's the other thing that we're featuring about with at the moment. And Zeshuan Chow, who I do quite a lot of work with now, has had quite a lot to input into that avenue of investigation.
Yeah.
So we're looking at tunability really from the point of view of having a set of chanters together, and you can easily retune them to, not so much. We're not thinking so much about different scales here, although that is possible. Just different temperaments in order to match them to different drone pitches. So, say you've got drones. Say your drones can do A, D, G, and so on. If you've got your chanter perfectly tuned to A, then it won't match the D or the G properly. There'll be little inconsistencies, and so we've been quite interested in the idea of making a chanter that you can easily adjust to try to match it to different drones. That's quite a challenge. It's something that's not going to be for every player, but it's something I would like to have in my pipe box, certainly.
So now this gives us some orientation for sort of where you're coming from with your work, your recording work, your performance work. Maybe we do a little bit of orientation for you yourself as well. Right now you're out in the middle of the ocean, but you're usually in Glasgow,
totally.
right?
Yes, that's right. We're in Ascension Island just now.
Yeah, so Ascension Island. It was funny the other day. I was messaging you on Facebook. I asked you how it was going. You said it was a nice 30 degrees out. And I said, oh, yeah, it's 30 degrees here as well. But of course, you were speaking Celsius and I was speaking Fahrenheit. Well, I was freezing my butt off out playing my pipes for a funeral. You were spending the evening at the pool.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. I know it's...
yeah, you should apologize to me. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I'm in Ascension Island. Basically, it's slap bang in the middle of the South Atlantic, quite near the equator. About roughly halfway between West Africa and Brazil. It's a pinhead of an island. It's about the size of Benbecula, although that would probably mean nothing to American listeners unless they've been up there. But it's a wee tiny place. It's got an airstrip. I think it is still the second longest airstrip in the world.
Oh, really?
It's being resurfaced. Yeah, it's being resurfaced currently by a Texan company. The airstrip itself belongs to the US Air Force. The taxiways and hard standing belong to the RAF, so they work out between themselves. And there's a US Air Force base, which has our only burger and pizza bar really on the island.
Is that where you're hanging out now?
RAF base. No, I'm at the pub in the RAF base where they actually also do burger. They do burgers and pizza here, although it's basically just burgers and pizza, whereas down at the US base, they do burgers, pizza, all the different kind of curly fries and all stuff like that. So we were out there earlier with the kids for dinner. And then I came up here and have been chilling out here since. And I had a quick tune with the LBPS earlier this evening on Zoom as well, which was really fun. But yeah, so there's that. So there's the two bases. And on the south side of the island, really, it's the two bases. And it's kind of a lot of single people. And then on the north side of the island, just over the hill, basically, 5 minutes away, it's the two villages where the civilian population live.
And have you affected the economy of the place such yet that the main export has become 3D printed bagpipes, or is there something else still happening there?
Well, the thing is, like a lot of these little islands and mini states, the main export, I think, is stamps from the post office.
Yeah, and which made me laugh the first time I read that. Then I thought, well, yeah, actually, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Basically, I now when I started making pipes again in July or August, I got a sudden inrush of orders from my waiting list.
Sure.
And so I declared just for fun in the local paper, I said, I think I'm the major, this month I'm probably the main export of Ascension Island now.
Yeah.
And I got a sort of a grin from the ladies in the post office when I went in to see them after that, because they'd seen it. And I think I'm probably safe in saying that at least for July, I probably was the main export. But I've probably got a ways to go if I'm to overtake the post office ladies. I've probably got to work a little bit harder.
Well, we'll get some orders in there then.
Yeah, I do. I think I probably got a way to go because these this is the thing. What is it they call philatelist? Stamp collectors. It's still quite a big thing, I think. Yeah. They apparently, when they print a new run of stamps, then AIG, which is Ascension Island government, call a lot of their staff in from all kinds of other, ostensibly important roles to go to the post office and help to pack up the stamps.
Because it's a big day, huh?
Yeah, that's
get them out of there.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main event. That's the main event. But it's slightly, actually, funnily enough, when we came here, it was just as sleepy as that would suggest. But now that they've started resurfacing the runway, there's a little bit more action on the island. In terms of new big boats arriving more frequently, and there's about 200 workers arrived to do that job as well, mostly from Turkey. It's busier than we knew it when we first arrived.
When you first did go there to, and I apologize, Donald, if it seems like I'm interrupting you, I'm certainly not meaning to. We're just so far apart that the delay in the audio throws it off a bit. When you first went out there, did you plan to keep making chanters and pipes, or is that something you decided to start up again because of COVID? Have you had to extend your stay out there with the COVID-19?
No, it was neither really. I didn't really plan to make them, but I had the possibility open in my mind that I might, and I thought, let's get out there and see what the lie of the land is. And I'll freely admit, I really did fancy even just the tag of being the most remote pipe maker in the world. I thought if I could make a couple of sets out here, that'd be hilarious. Out in the middle of the South Atlantic, things take 3 months sometimes to get here by post, and yet I'm going to manage to make some sets and get them out to my customers. Hopefully reasonably close to within the time frame I said I would, although that's working out quite tricky just now with COVID and Brexit, because most of our post here goes through the UK. So I think I'm going to be a couple of months late with the round of orders I'm working on just now, unfortunately. But that's just because of the state of the world, really, rather than anything else. And it is actually.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It is actually quite. No, that's fine. It is theoretically, if we didn't have COVID and Brexit at the same time, theoretically it would be quite feasible to be doing this from out here.
Yeah.
And I would easily be able to at least match the kind of delivery times and order list times that most small pipe makers have, unless I got as busy as they did, in which case I'd be totally screwed and it would take ages.
Yeah, well, that's true. Some of them have waiting lists that are probably longer than they have on this earth at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now, thankfully, I think when I opened the waiting list again, I think it was only about a quarter of the waiting list that took me up. Because obviously I'm out at the ends of the earth, and I kind of thought to myself, I wonder if anybody will dare place an order while I'm out here, being so far away from civilization. But there was quite a few brave souls that did do it.
Well, it could be cool to have that Ascension stamp on it. There'll be a limited edition.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Well, that's what I've done. Yeah, and I thought it'd be a good idea to give, just to give a bit of recognition to the fact that they took the plunge like that. So I designed a stamp. And it is a wide awake, which is one of the characteristic endemic birds of the. Well, I don't think it's endemic, the wide awake, because it's a sooty tern. You do get them elsewhere as well, but it's one of the birds that the island's known for. And so I've got this outline of a wide awake, and then behind it, I've got this zigzag. Now, this is a crazy story, but it's kind of fun. The zigzag is roughly the outline of the main hill in the middle of the island, Sister's Peak, the second tallest one. But it is also, it's actually a plot of the pictures of one of the vocalizations of the wide awake is that in the first 6 months or so that we were here, myself and my eldest son Ryle, we were messing about recording the wide awakes and then sending them back to Richard in Glasgow. He was slowing them down on the reel-to-reel, and then we were getting these recordings back, and we were trying to identify, a melodic line from these calls, and actually it turned out to be very easy to do. So we got these bars of music, basically, and they're different time signatures, different keys, mostly fit on the pipes. That are the calls that the wide awakes are using, and we think they're the calls that they're using to coordinate when they're flying, because they fly almost in formation, thousands of them. And the most common call that we found, which came up with slightly different intervals but the same outline, is this call that kind of goes da, 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 like that. It's like like that. When the bird sings it, it's more like that. What I just did with my voice. But when you kind of reduce it to pitches and play it on an instrument, that's how it comes out. So I said to Ralph, try it. And even before we'd actually isolated that, when we first got the recording back, he's got quite a good ear. And when we first got the recording back, it was just the raw recording. I said to him, try sketching that out and see if you can make a kind of graphical sketch of what you're hearing there. And he came up with all these little lines all over the kind of piece of paper that were all the different bird calls he could hear in the flock. And he said, and he looked at it and he said, a lot of them have this similar pattern. He said, and it looks, when I draw it, a little bit like Sister's Peak, which is this mountain. Yeah. And I was like, you know what, it does, Ryle. And then, so when we got the slowed down recordings back, and then we worked out the pitches, and then we plotted it, and the same pattern came out that he'd been scribbling by ear. And I was like, you've done a good job there, Ryle. That's great.
Yeah, good on him. That's amazing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the pitch, the kind of contours of the pitch, he'd gotten them by ear, but it took taking it down 2 octaves. And slowing it down, so it was quarter speed that Richard put it to on the reel-to-reel before we could actually really hear that right in our face, because it is quite a high-pitched bird. And so that was really fun. That was really interesting as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I mean, can you imagine a bird indigenous to maybe I don't know, Kenya or something, singing a tune that if you plotted it would look like Kilimanjaro or something like that, that idea of a bird mimicking its landscape in some way. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I started that on the chanter because I thought it looked nice, but it's also this motif that we're messing about with, and we're trying to work out. We've got quite a few other ones. We've got about 7 discrete ones that we got from the first round of recording. And Ryle's, my son, is working with those in Fruit Loops at his FL Studio he uses. And he's got loads of recordings of me playing these bars, single repeated bars on the pipes. I don't know what he's going to do with it, but he's going to have some fun with it anyway. Yeah. It's crazy. Now, part of what gave us the idea to go and investigate the birds like that was in Scotland's Music, which is the book by John Purser, about basically giving the history of music in Scotland from the day one to the present day. And he talks early on in that, and in the radio series, he did a BBC radio series that accompanied it. And John early on focuses on the role of birdsong in the early development of music. And particularly picks out the Pilliliu, which is the keening song, which is based on the call of the red shank. And when you hear it's wonderful when you hear the red shank, and its call is basically Pilliliu, Pilliliu, like that. So there's a semitone drop at the end of that, and that's in the tune expanded into that goes Pilliliu, Pilliliu, like that, which is the keening, one of the keening tunes that they think used to be sung around the grave, and it's to do with the fact that the red shank is a wader on the shoreline, and so is an intermediary between the dry land and the sea, and an intermediary between the land of the living and the land of the dead. But it's so interesting that that tune had been expanded in that way from this little nugget of a bird call, which isn't in itself, the most melodic bird call you could ever hear.
Yeah.
But it's got essential characteristics in its rhythm and its melody that have been expanded into this beautiful tune. So that was what set us thinking maybe we should check out some of these birds on the island here and see what they're saying. Because it struck us that really there's not been any music written for the place here ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, it's a transient place. I remember the doctor here said to me recently, said, yes, it's like a bus stop, Donald. He's from South Africa.
Yeah.
And people come here and they work. It's you've got to have an active contract to be on the island, really, or be in the family of somebody who does. So it's an odd place in world terms in that way.
That's what a cool thing for you and your son to have thought to do. I remember coming across some pieces of classical music that were supposed to have been inspired by birdsong, particularly in the UK when I was in high school taking some music theory classes. I know Haydn and Beethoven took some cues from local birds and things like that. What a cool idea to kind of look around right where you are and see what you could pull from that. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And seabirds, they're never as elaborate as songbirds in their calls. But if you take the view that it's a kind of a seed of a composition, and particularly the wide awakes, but also one of the other two or three species of terns that are on the island. There's something in there that could spring a really interesting tune, or two. And I think with the wide awakes, there's a fair handful of different calls, because all the calls we've got, we realise just now, are calls that they make, vocalizations that they make when they are doing, when they're nesting, and they do this kind of loose formation that they use to try to scare off walkers who come into the nesting site. And it was the last time we were there, I heard, before they got started with that, I heard a group of them over near the rocks that weren't paying any attention to us, and I recognised, because we'd done so much listening to what they were vocalising, I recognised right away that these weren't vocalizations I'd heard before. But what we did record, it's when you walk through the nesting site, they take to the air all at once. A large number of them take to the air, and they fly. Now, ascensions, it's in the path of the trade winds in the South Atlantic, so it's always got this breeze blowing the same direction. And always, every time we've been down there, what they do is they go to the lee side of the trade wind, the lee side of you, and they fly into the wind and hover over your head, and they make all this noise. And they do this not in strict formation, but in some sort of a formation and coordination. And the only change to it is when you get near to a nest of one of them, then it starts making a much more aggressive call and coming in close to you. But for most of the time that you're walking, you've got this quite intimidating flock. There must be thousands
just hovering
of birds
right above you, as if they're ready to pounce on you.
Exactly, yeah. They'll come down, and they deliberately make kind of slightly threatening, swooping motions towards you.
Have you sat down and did you sit down and watch the Alfred Hitchcock film with your kids to get a little caution into them?
Totally. Exactly. It's kind of reminiscent of that. If you've watched that, then it's guaranteed to give you the willies when all the thousands of birds are flying over your head. So that's what they're doing, and then they're making these, which are fairly high pitched, fairly musical vocalizations, and you can hear the same message, if you like, being passed along different kind of veins within this big flock. It's really interesting. It's I'm hoping to go down and see them again soon. I'm thinking they get started nesting again within the next couple of months. I'm going to be down there again listening to them. I find, having looked so closely, if you get that closely into into something, it can become a kind of a consuming fascination.
Oh, I can understand that. You kind of start to find that there are endless layers of depth that, like, you think you figured it out, and then it's like, wait, there's another layer here, and you go deeper and deeper.
Yeah,
And
totally,
you're really opening up my
absolutely,
imagination to early music and how much it would have been inspired by nature and maybe particularly by birdsong.
yeah, totally. Well, there was this thing as well, wasn't there, that some a traveler, and terrible, I can't remember anything about this except I just have this kind of this after image of the story in my head. But somebody would know who this was. There was a traveller that went to St Kilda at some point in the 19th century, and said that one of the things that the local piper specialised in was imitating seabird songs.
Oh,
Which they seem to think. I think the quote I remember was something about the people considering this great music, which the way that they wrote it was clear they didn't. But I was thinking to myself, I don't know. I think I would have liked to hear that,
yeah.
because if you're living out there, I mean, St Kilda, very remote as well, surrounded by seabirds, and he's using his pipes to respond to them.
You know, I
Um,
also have this vague association between something special about the pipes in St. Kilda and a mouse, maybe some sort of story I heard at some point.
right, I don't know that one.
Huh.
What was the?
Well, I don't
Can
think I
you
would have
remember the
thought of it
bones
if
of
you
that
hadn't
story?
mentioned it. No, but I'm gonna have to start
Yeah.
looking around now because it's like you've dug it up out of my mind. I hadn't thought of it for years.
Yeah, I'm going to look up that St Kilda story as well and see if I can find out what the detail was of
Mhm.
it. I'm pretty sure there'll be probably pipers listening who'll know, because I'm pretty sure it was in the Piping Times or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to have a dig because it was just the way that that stuck out to me. The way that they described the local piper imitating seabird calls using his pipes.
Yeah.
Um, which, if you're surrounded by them all day, I would have thought, I mean, my suspicion would be that he was probably trying to get fairly close to the sound of the seabirds. So they're
Yeah.
not just doing a kind of a joke thing or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, hey, maybe tell me, while you've been there, have you been manufacturing chanters only, or are you making full sets of pipes?
I'm making one full set of pipes,
Yeah.
and it's going to be pretty deluxe, because I'm really quite, I have this way, I tend to think, particularly being out here, somebody's gone to they've had the courage to place their order for a set of pipes from the ends of the earth. So I'm going
Yeah.
to make it something pretty cool. Yeah, it's going to have hopefully this tunable chanter,
Yeah.
and it's going to have a adjustable drone stop.
Mm.
Two things that I've been working on that I think are quite important about the drone stock. Obviously, the size of the cavity is very important,
Hmm.
but also one thing I've been wanting to do to the drone stock for a while is make flow control going into the drone stock, because it seems to me, and I might be totally wrong about this, but some rough experiments I've tried have yielded promising and very interesting results. It's this whole thing about mode locking.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've read
And
about
I
this.
think, yeah, one thing I think you could do to try to encourage that, or some other form of beneficial resonant kind of support for the drones, is to, regarding the inside of the drone stock as a Helmholtz resonator. Um, if you have easily adjustable flow control going into that, then that's your control of the resonance port of the resonator, I'm thinking. And I've
I
tried
see.
doing this without actually having a control. I've tried varying the aperture, because the aperture from my drone stock into the bag is quite narrow, and I've
Mm.
tried varying the aperture just by using brass tubes and so on and sleeving it, and it does um, have quite a pronounced effect on the stability and the sound of the drones.
I see.
So
So
yeah,
so
so this is
so
a drone
where
stock.
so where some manufacturers would have a simple switch that's basically just on and off, you're thinking more a
Yeah,
dial where you could say I want a little more air or a little less air.
yeah, it's got two dials. One of them has got a steeply pitched screw thread that's designed to open and close with a quarter turn.
Mm.
So that's your on off. And the other one has a more shallow pitch screw thread, which is designed for gradual control. And that's designed to be your flow control going into the stop. So there's the two controls there. And then there's also a means by which you can immediately shut the drones on and off. I'll not say anything about that for now, though, because that's quite an interesting one.
Okay.
I'll wait until I finish designing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's these basically dials on top of the drone stop, right next to the bag. One of which is a quarter turn twist valve, if you like, just to turn it on and off, and the other of which is for gradual adjustment to try to fine tune the flow into the stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's some of the cool stuff. Yeah. So there is somebody, and then the rest of them are chanters.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
some of my friends listening to this, Donald, might not know a thing about the chanter, and this is how I found you, is the Lindsay system chanter.
Yeah.
What version are you on right now? Are you working on with version 3, or are we at version 4?
5. I've jumped
5,
on to.
really? Wow.
If I get this tuning system, so this is to make every hole tunable.
Yeah.
If I get the tuning system together in time for this round, which really, that's something I've got to get settled very soon.
Yeah.
If I get it together, then that's version 5. If not, without the tuning system, just a tunable flea hole. So I'll explain the design of the chanter.
Yeah, talk to me about it.
4.
And at some point, maybe right about here, I'll put in a recording of you playing it so people can get an idea of just how exciting this is. Just what possibilities this opens up to a pipe player who only has played, Highland piping or Scottish small pipe fingering.
Yeah, basically, here's a brief description of what the Lindsay system chanter is. The Lindsay system chanter is a Scottish small pipe chanter in the key of A. And if you can play the Highland bagpipes and or the Scottish small pipes or the lowland pipes, then you can lift the Lindsay system chanter, plug it into your pipes and play it right away. And it plays just the same as the Scottish small pipe chanter in A. There's some slight differences in feel because there's very slight differences in the shape of the chanter, but the layout of the holes and the techniques that you would use are all the same. The difference is that Lindsay system chanter can go down below low G to a low D and up above high A to a high D at the least, and it can actually go almost an octave further than that if you learn the technique, which is a little trickier for that.
That's the how did you describe it? The unbridled key, or the wild range totally, up above. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That is the and I even gave it a kind of colourful picture name for it in one of the Piping Today articles as well. Called it the kind of dew pond, which is based on the highest walk on the highest mountain here, which is through a bamboo thicket on a very narrow path of steps. So you're very restricted. You can only go in one direction, back or forward, and you have to cover these very long steps with your legs. It's a kind of obscure reference because it'll only make sense to people who've actually been up the Dew Pond Walk, which will be very few people. But it was a way of kind of just creating a picture that hopefully will cause people to, pipers who are trying to get the hang of the chanter, to kind of think about the nature of that part of the range. It's very tricky to use. Once you're up there above the top of the second octave, then you have to move in a particular stepwise way. But within the 2 octaves, it's free, pretty free. It really can be played.
Just to make this absolutely clear to the listener, you've got your standard range from high A down to low G. This system allows you to then go down below low G to F sharp, and even lower to E, and even lower to D, and up above your high A, you can go up to B, up to C sharp, up to D, and even higher. And not only that, throughout the standard range, you've also got accidentals that are possible, these semitones.
Exactly. Totally. And the accidentals that you can get in the standard range are the same as you would get on a border pipe chanter, but the fingering is different for those.
Right, but you've managed to do this with no keys. There are no keys at all on the chanter, so you can play, like you say, you can play your normal tunes with normal fingering, and then you just kind of learn a couple extra fingerings for these other notes.
Yep, totally, exactly. So basically, you can play it right away you can play all your familiar stuff. And the first things to learn are high B,
Mm-hmm.
and low F sharp. And then you learn the new notes incrementally from there, adding low E, low D, high C sharp, high D, and then you learn the semitones. And so basically, you've got this 2-octave range, and you've got your 2 octaves in D, basically. Same range as an Highland pipe or a low whistle or whistle. You've got the C natural there, which you get on those instruments. You've got a G sharp at the top, just before your high A. You've got an F natural, and you've even got a B flat and a D sharp, which are useful for one or two tunes themselves. And the B flat and the C natural allows you to play Ross Ainsley's tune Dirty D, for an example, which is a bit of a favourite now, and a great border pipe tune. So you can play anything the border pipes in A could play. You can play anything that, frankly, anything the Highland pipes could play, you can play. Anything a whistle can play. It'll all come out a little differently on this pipe, and there's a bit of technique to be learned to make the full use of its range.
Yeah.
But that can be learned at the player's own pace, because, as I say, the core range will support you to play as if you're just playing an ordinary small pipe in A without having any additional technique at all.
Right. And you don't in any way sort of just sell a chanter and then say it's up to you to learn the rest. You've got you have this whole community building up of on Facebook and otherwise, exactly, where you play through tunes with people. You've got instructional videos. It's a whole system.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's all about for me. There's a group on Facebook, and I go onto there as time allows. I've been absent from it for a couple of months while the kids are on their school holidays. I'll be back on again soon, sharing tunes and stuff. And it's great. I mean, this is what it's all about for me at the end of the day, is the music, and getting this new chanter going and finding out how best to play it, what fits best the repertoire, just a community of players around it. It's an open source design, so anybody's welcome to make it. And that's important for me, because I don't actually want to end up being sort of stowed out with orders as a pipe maker. I would rather make one or two, and share one or two of them. And at the same time, there are other makers. Szechuan Chow also makes them 3D printed to his own design in London. And those are good as far as I can tell. I haven't played any of Szechuan's recent work because I've been over here, but it sounds good. And Malin Lewis in the Isle of Skye is making them out of wood by hand.
Oh, really? I didn't know anyone was doing that.
Yeah, Malin Lewis. Now, Malin is a very interesting young piper who is, I think, entering their third year at the RCS. They contacted me in, I think it was January 2018, round about the time the first article came out. We met at the Piping Centre, And once I realized that Malin was a pipe maker, I said, would you like to make this design? And they were like, yes, absolutely. And they were in 6th year at school at the time, in the Plockton music unit in the Highlands, which is a specialist traditional music school. And I went up for a visit one time when I was going to see my friend John Purser, who was mentioned before, who wrote the Scotland's music. I was going to stay with John for a weekend in Skye, in where he stays, away out in Elgol. And on the way, I called in on Malin and I was able to go to Malin's 6th year, which is the last year of secondary school, or high school, as you guys would say it. So their high school show, basically, in this specialist music unit. And then go over to their home in Skibus Bridge, which is right on the north of Skye, where they were working on a prototype wooden version of the chanter. Since then, Malin came down to study at the RCS in the traditional music degree, and the week after we arrived here, it was piping live back home, and Malin did the Wednesday night LBPS concert, sold it out for a show called 2 Octaves with Jarlath Henderson on uilleann pipes, where they went head to head. Oh, it was brilliant. They went head to head with Malin's iteration of the Lindsay-system chanter and Jarlath's uilleann pipes.
No, really?
And it was such a success. Oh, it was amazing. And I think they should do an album of this, but I don't know whether, obviously they probably need to wait until they can meet again. But it ended up at Celtic Connections 2020. And sold out before Christmas, for Celtic Connections 2020. Ali Hutton was playing guitar, Jarlath on the uilleann pipes, Malin on the Lindsay system. And this is just an example of what it's all about for me. It's going to have a life of its own, this chanter. I build them. I'll do crazy stuff with them, like put optical pickups into them and make them fully tunable. Malin makes them by hand out of, ebony or blackwood or whatever. Boxwood as well. I think they've done boxwood, and the original was made out of laburnum, which pleased me no end, because laburnum, as you probably know, is the sort of original wood of the Highland pipes. And for the first prototype of a wooden Lindsay system chanter to be made in laburnum was something that I nerded out on.
There's another one of those beautiful interweavings of tradition with modern innovation, huh?
Absolutely, yep. An originally 3D printed design, reverse engineered into wood on the most basic setup, really, that you can imagine, short of actually going back to a bowl lathe. I mean, Malin literally had a tiny little shed in their parents' garden in Skye, with a hand-turning lathe and just a couple of chisels and nothing else.
Wow!
And that's where this was made. Yeah, it was made in there. Two quails, a pair of nesting quails in a cage. It was really, really cool. Tiny little workshop, and that's where this was done. And it was done in laburnum, and it worked beautifully. And we played the two of them together. At the time, it would be the version 3, I think. It wasn't even 3.5. And it was the first one that I'd made of version 3, I'm pretty sure, because that was a set that I took up to Skye and road tested just to check it was working well, and then I sent it to a guy in Germany. And we sounded the two of them together, and it sounded like matched chanters. It was great. And all the sizes I'd sent up to Malin via Messenger over the months from about March to May, and then went up there in June, and it was awesome. It was a heat wave, and it was very memorable. Just sitting playing in the sitting room in Skye with these 2 pipes, totally differently manufactured, but to the same pattern.
Well, and again, even just being on Skye, to play it once again, I just feel like, well, what a place of sort of bagpiping history, and to be sitting there on that island playing your chanter. That's awesome.
Exactly, and what a place to then become part of it becomes part of the story as well.
Yeah.
That it then has it's got a chapter of the story in Skye, and yeah, I mean, it's just so many different things to it. It's good to. I really enjoy just telling the story of all this stuff.
Well, and
because it's been such a winding journey.
And it's very exciting for me. I'll tell you, when I came across your work in the with the 3D printed chanter, but I also found that you'd done these whistles, the bass whistle and the standard whistle, and that you were making so much of this so readily available to everyone. That's one of the things that blew my mind and kind of made me go, now this guy, I want to know what this guy's up to, because I can imagine the argument, that some might make to say, oh, you designed it, now you keep it under lock and key. It's your thing, But I'm curious, do you think that would it have achieved the popularity that it has now? Would it have been innovated quite so far as it has now if you'd tried to hide it away?
I'm almost certain that it wouldn't have. I think, for example, I don't think there would have been any 2 octaves with Malin and Jarlath, and I think that's been a big thing back home in terms of introducing the scene to this instrument. So I don't think there would have been any of that, and I think a lot of it would not be at the stage it's at now in terms of awareness and acceptance. And here's the thing, James, what made me do that was a hunch that I had based on what I understood to be the history of the Uilleann pipes and the Northumbrian pipes and the Brian Boru pipes. And I had this vague idea that you'd had this development beginning in the 1700s through pastoral pipes, union pipes, towards the Uilleann pipes, that had been done by this dispersed group of pipe makers working in, as I understand it, Edinburgh, Newcastle, Dublin, London, and then laterally in New York and other places. And that this essentially was an open design process, and without anybody holding a patent over it. And again, the same thing happened in a slightly different way, in a slightly smaller and more focused way, in Newcastle in around 1800, when John Peacock worked with John Dunn. And we know more about that, I suppose, probably directly how that happened. And one of the things John Peacock did once they'd refined the design of the 5-keyed chanter was release Peacock's tunes with the drawing of the chanter at the back and the scale and a clear depiction of how the keys were laid out. And it struck me that was almost like, that influenced what we later did in releasing the pattern, the workshop plans in piping today. That was directly influenced. And although it wasn't a workshop plan that Peacock published, that was a direct influence on what we did there.
And that flavors throughout all your work. Even the cover of the album, Good History of Sleep, is some kind of schematic. I think that's maybe the print and play one.
It is.
Yeah.
No, that is the version. Was it 3.5? And that's
is
schematic drawn
gotcha.
That's drawn by Zeshwan Chal.
Gotcha.
And it is the same. It's actually the same schematic that was published in the middle pages of Piping Today in 2019 in August. And so that was the release. That was the kind of public release of the plans. But then, I reflected on what had happened to the Brian Boru, and I might be reading it all wrong, but the Brian Boru obviously was a patented project, and it just seems to me that a keyed Highland bagpipe, maybe it wouldn't have taken hold, or maybe it would have. But the fact that it was down to the one guy to make them all and maintain them all, or at least that's how it seems, to me seems like it could only have restricted the progress. Because you see, when you make a new instrument, when you extend the range of an existing instrument, you're not just bringing a new product to market to benefit your consumer, like you would be with a new bag or a new set of reeds or a new, you know what I mean, or even a new design of chanter. You're bringing something to market that your consumer can just trot in, buy, walk off with, and experience a greatly improved playing life. When you create a new instrument, you're actually saying to whoever takes it up, they're going to need to give it a large piece of their life. You're saying, give me a piece of your brain here. You're going to have to learn how to live within this instrument, just in the same way that we do. We learn to live within the pipes when we first take them up and understand them from within. Well, this is a much extended kind of world that you're learning to inhabit here. You're going to have to learn to understand it without any literature to help you first, although I'm working on that. You're going to have to explore it, relate to it, and it's going to take away a lot of your time before you get a great deal back musically. But it's also going to become something that's a part of you. And I think that for that reason, new instruments that are released under patent that don't use the same playing system as ones that came before, you don't often hear of them taking hold very firmly. You know, usually, I mean, you know, when you think of mainstream instruments, the saxophone has to be the last one that, you know, really is very widespread, surely. Because electric guitar uses the same system as the guitar that went before.
Right. Sort of the canon of sort of air quotes acceptable instruments is kind of an exclusive group, and it's kind of hard to break into that group.
Yes. And so for something new like this to succeed, obviously it's addressing a need that pipers playing in the Scottish fingering system have, which is a desire to interact with folk music and other kinds of music more widely with a wider range without having to just bin their existing technique. But it seems like even with that, if it was one person's product, it would it limits its availability, it limits the amount of support that's available, it limits the growth of the community. It also encourages resistance from other makers, encourages negativity within the community, all kinds of different reasons why it doesn't really help. And you know, if you took to doing something like this with purely a business plan in mind, I don't think you'd come to this kind of conclusion. It's very much not a business, really. At the end of the day, the chanter itself is, you know, it's a musical work, the same as an album or a tune.
And a kind of a living one too, you know, in that you mean the innovation is ongoing.
Exactly. And one of the things I'm most pleased about from last year is that we got to the stage where we put the downloadable version out there, and I think that's one kind of, you know, that's one kind of goal of mine now sorted, which was to make it available to anybody on the assumption that 3D printing is going to become pretty ubiquitous. I mean, you can now get printers for around about the £100 mark, and on the assumption it's going to become pretty ubiquitous.
If someone doesn't have one, they probably know someone who does, or can get to a library that has one or something.
Exactly, and they can get one printed.
I've printed 4 of them myself already, and if any of my bandmates want one, let me know.
Oh, do it, yeah. Excellent. This is the idea. And it means that then there's universal access, theoretically, and so the system can be evaluated and the technique can be learned. And that in its turn is going to support. There's one thing I was very conscious of with this, was I didn't want to do something that would, and I don't think it would, but I didn't want to do something that would upset the ecosystem of pipe making, because I know a lot of pipe makers and a great admiration for what they do. They're often hugely busy. They're not well remunerated. They do it for the love of it, and they work very hard. And you know, I wanted this to be something that would, you know, take hold organically and could become something that, you know, if they want to buy into this and learn to make it alongside border pipes and small pipes, then that's open to them, and that support, you know, that supports the chanter itself. If people do that, it's just very much the same as it is with the traditional designs of pipes. It's all part of a kind of organic community.
And it's a really good system for we the players as well. You know, what like some of the things that I absolutely love about this is, like, first of all, I'm definitely one of those pipers who's just thirsty for a way to have sort of more range. You know, I mean, I hunted the internet for years to find a Brian Boru chanter. It's either hard to find or prohibitively expensive to get a hold of them. I try, you know, cross fingering on my Highland pipes, but I'm at a very high altitude. It's very difficult to get it to work. And so then I look at uilleann pipes and I think, wow, they're beautiful. I'd love to learn them. But again, I have the cost of getting a whole new instrument, a whole new system, and having to throw out my knowledge that I've built up over, you know, 15 years to play the Highland pipes. Where this Lindsay system,
exactly.
I mean, you do make full sets of small pipes, and they are beautiful. You know, people might hear 3D printed small pipes and think that they'll be cheap and flimsy, but what you make looks really great. But aside from that, a person can get just this chanter and have their knowledge of the Highland pipe still be applicable, and have their drones from any pipe maker, as far as I understand it. You know, I've got some Walsh small pipes, and I've plugged in the printed chanter into those. It sounds just great. You know, it breaks down barriers for the player as well, cost barriers and knowledge barriers, and that I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. And when you mentioned the quality end of 3D printed pipe making, that's another thing that I was very motivated to explore that as fully as I could. And one of the reasons that is that I recognized early on, there was a wee bit of chat about what's 3D printing going to mean for pipe making I remember on Bob Dunstar forum at one point, and online and so on, and speculation about what this would mean for pipe making and how would it affect pipe makers. And I thought, well, you know, it put me in mind of the whole thing where, you know, obviously in the 80s into the 90s, electronic music became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in Scottish traditional music and piping, we were lucky to have Martin Bennett come in and take a hold of the new technology and give it a shake and use it for something really profoundly, soundly rooted and deep and meaningful. Rather than just leave it to whoever came along to use it as a gimmick. And that is almost like by doing that, it's almost like he spiked the guns of anybody who might have wanted to come in and do a gimmick of Scottish music with technology. And so I kind of thought, I guess, you know, we can do the same thing with 3D printing. Just explore it absolutely fully as far as possible in the service of something that actually is extending the scope of the tradition.
Right, not replacing it, just extending it, expanding. Yeah,
exactly. And also by folding it back into the, you know, as soon as I had the chance to work in support of Malin making the first wooden one, I thought, by folding it back in and making it clear that this in its own way is a prototype for something that can then be made using traditional means, it's celebrating the idea that we can achieve new things through technology while at the same time elevating the tradition and the craft skills of the makers who are making in wood and who are making pipes in the traditional way. So there's lots of different things going on there, and that's where the whole thing is. It's all about all these dimensions. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah,
and it's been very, very fun to pursue and to see how it's all unfolded.
Well, I can tell you for myself personally, like you making, well, you and I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce their name. Is it Zeshwan? Zeshwan?
Zeshwan, yeah, Zeshwan Cha.
So making the two of you collaborating. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, when I met Zeshwan, Zeshwan contacted me on Instagram. We met for coffee in the Mitchell Library in Glasgow. I can't even remember when that was, but it has to have been about 2016, I think. Shortly after, now Zeshwan at the time was studying at the Glasgow School of Art and had just finished making, or was in the process of making, a 3D printed serpent, the Renaissance curly trumpet.
Oh yeah,
He's a background as a traditional Chinese woodwind player. And an artist, obviously, studying up the art school in interaction design. Part of his area of interest there was machine learning, something that he's still very interested in. But Zeshwan's just into so many different things, and right away, I thought this is a fascinating guy. I have to do more with him, so he joined the small pipes group at the College of Piping as was, which later got absorbed into the Piping Centre, and was with us in that group and in the Glasgow Small Pipers for what must have been a couple of years before I left to come over to Ascension. And then at the same time, Zeshwan moved down to London to go to UCL and to do a master's in the small pipes, basically, investigating effective different materials and different design concepts on the sound of the instrument.
Yeah.
Part of the project is studying the Lindsay system, so it's brilliant. And so that was the background to my getting involved in Zeshwan. And on the fringes of the Glasgow Small Pipers and the weekly small pipe class in the college, I was informally teaching Zeshwan, everything that I gathered, such as it was about using 3D printing to make pipes. So now we fire stuff back and forth on Messenger, and really a lot of interesting conversations happen there. Yeah. We're also heavily involved in the Facebook groups. Zeshwan's very active on social media, much more than me, but is a key member of the 3D Bagpipe and Whistle Builders group and the Lindsaysystem group, and just very involved in the project. Probably the most involved beside himself at the moment, but there are other guys as well who are very deeply into it.
Yeah, I've been mostly a very, very happy observer of all of this. I've experimented with. I've printed off a set of your Highland pipes. I printed off a set of your D small pipe drones. I printed a lot of whistles, and just messing with the sizes of the parts too, just to see what keys I could get them into. It's all a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you do
go ahead.
Resize,
resize.
If you do a resize, I think we talked about that. But yeah, if you resize them according to the ratio between the keynote frequencies, then you'll get something very interesting. Wider bore as you go up the key, as you go down the keys, than you would have normally, but it still works and it's usually perfectly in tune.
Yeah, I've had really good success with it, and it's a lot of fun. And
totally.
I don't think that, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. It's that delay. Sorry about that, Donald.
Yeah, no, that's fine. A B flat or an A made by that way is very throaty and almost as wide bore, round about the same bore as a low D whistle would be. And I've used them. I've used them in concerts. I'm pretty sure I've used them in concerts with Alistair Roberts. This massive big A. In fact, I think I put it on a record of his. This big A whistle made by resizing just according to the ratio. So almost basically as wide as a low whistle would be, but up in A. Yeah. So that'd be the kind of thing you'll be getting as well. They're really fun.
Yeah, and I don't think that maybe I could be wrong, but speaking from a personal perspective, I don't think that your openness with these designs and with these ideas has in any way sort of hurt the commercial viability of the idea, because for me personally, being able to play with these ideas is exactly what gets me even more excited about the work you're doing. And like printing off one of these print and play chanters, they're excellent. But it only makes me even more excited to purchase one of the, System 5 chanters. You know what I mean? It's just it's giving.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's like there's tinder here to burn, and the fire can only spread this fast if you let it. And so you're not trapping the fire in any way. And I really appreciate that personally, just as a consumer and a player.
Yeah, exactly. I think it can work that way as well, and it's all there for the kind of puzzling out whether or not I eventually get deeper into making, which if I did, I would be edging into making in wood, I think, as well, but probably with 3D printed elements, or whether I go down the playing route and let, for example, Zeshwan specialize more heavily in the making. It depends on a lot of things, but yeah, absolutely. I think I'll always have something on the go in terms of making, purely because I really like the idea of coming up with I come up with one that's fully optical and so on and so forth. I'd like to share that with a few people and make a few of them. Just as being here, I had the bug to share a few made out here and just let a few people share in that kind of side of things. It's whether or not it becomes a major going concern or not is, I suspect probably not. I think it will always be just one part of what I'm up to. I remember talking to Finn Moore about this. He has this kind of thing where, he does the pipe making, but he doesn't want to get too busy with that because he enjoys doing the playing as well. Yeah. I think that's part of it. If you're a maker and a player, then the two things can be in conflict sometimes, and want too much of you. Making certainly always wants a lot of you. Sure, even if you're making using 3D printed parts, it's still, to get them right, to get them fine-tuned and everything and set up so you're satisfied, it wants a lot of you. It wants,
it's not like you can't just push a button and walk away and expect a top quality thing to come out.
Oh no, and if you're anyway a perfectionist, then once it's put together, that then signals, 1 day, how many days, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, how long does it go on before you sit and you say to yourself, look, I really need to send this out now. I've played it enough. I'm sure it's brilliant. I'm sure it's brilliant. And a little bit of that is the sort of alienation of letting go of the thing, where of saying, goodbye to it. But one of the things about having this active community online is that I have this sort of sensation that if I make a pipe for somebody and I send it out, I probably will meet it again down the line and hear them playing it.
True enough.
At some point, at some point I'll be out and about somewhere, and they'll turn up, or somebody will turn up with a set of pipes that I haven't seen in a while, and I'll get to hear them. I think that's one of the nice things about working in small pipe and bellow pipe making, full stop, is that you're so likely to encounter the things you've made out in the field, and sort of reconnect with what you're doing that way. It's this is all. It's all for me. It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And it's all part of a kind of a sort of a big community experience.
Had I read early on, Donald, that your sort of day job was that you were a plumber, or am I remembering incorrectly?
An electrician, yes.
Electrician, electrician, that's right.
Yeah, totally. So until we left for Ascension, while we're out here, it is possible for me to work as an electrician out here as well. But at the moment, what with one thing and another, we've decided that it's best if I focus on the books and things.
Yeah, that's right. You're working on a book, aren't you?
Yeah, totally. So that's very kind of Hannah. She's quite into that. She was kind of in the back seat a little bit for a while. My wife Hannah, professionally, after our youngest was born, and so she's kind of got back into her career now out here, and is returning the favour, if you like. So I'm focusing on some of the stuff that because when I look back over the last few years, going back to 2014, I think I did achieve a hell of a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, from where I'm sitting, I'm like, well, this guy must have just gone full time at this whole Lindsay system instruments and recording and stuff, because a lot of stuff has been produced. Yeah,
totally. I'm kind of flabbergasted because I never felt like I was doing really as much as I could be, but it was all happening all the same. And now that I'm out here, it's I think there's going to be a lot of things happen here. We're going to stay another 2 years, partly because of the state of things back home. And the way things look this year, so we are going to be out here a little bit longer than planned.
Yeah.
So I think there will be a lot more things. I think most of the ideas I've talked to you about tonight will probably be realities by the time we take the final plane home.
Yeah.
And the book itself, the method, and hopefully a whole lot more besides recordings and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah. Well, Donald, you've got a lot of work out there. In the show notes, I'm going to try to include links to at least samples of sort of all the different aspects of things you've done and things you're working on. Kind of a final note here. I want to include this little blurb that you wrote on your website where it says, if you're a piper, particularly if you understand something of the principles of acoustics as they apply to small pipes, all of this, the things that you and I have been talking about the Lindsay system chanter, it will sound too good to be true. Yeah. And that's absolutely the case. Yeah. Like when I encountered it, I was like, this can't be. Really keyless? Really that big of a range? Really accidentals? This cannot be true. Like, how is this even possible? And I would invite anybody listening to this who hasn't looked into it before, look into it. Your mind will explode with the possibilities that this opens up to you. And again, with so many barriers broken down, knowledge barriers, cost barriers, etc., it's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so, and I'm looking forward to seeing what transpires and who gets into it and what they do with it and where it goes. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. Now, Don, is there anything else that you'd enjoy sort of talking about for people to hear about, or do you feel like that's a pretty good conversation to put together?
Yeah, I could give one or two signposts to things that they might look out for in the future. We've already talked about the album that I'm hoping to work on with Alistair Roberts. Now, I shouldn't say too much about this, but actually there is the potential, and I won't say exactly what direction this is coming from, or what organisation this is coming from at this stage, because it's not been finally confirmed, but there's a possibility that might be a little documentary about what I've been up to.
that'd be
while I'm out
wonderful.
here, which will be really cool. And that is leading to possibly that is connected to possibly also another recording of a contrasting style, because one of the wonderful things about this chanter is it opens up all these doors. And what I'll be doing with Alistair in the traditional tunes recording that we had planned is really exploring, and it's quite old school music, if you like, even going into things like the Caledonian Companion, and it will be small pipes and fingerstyle guitar. And so there's this other possibility coming forward through this documentary project that might be the kind of kindling for a bigger album, which is going to explore much more contemporary trad music on the chanter, and it's possibly going to have a kind of transatlantic element to it as well. But I won't say too much about that just now. So there may well be, we may well be recording with musicians in now at the moment. It's possibly one of the guys I'm talking about is in Tennessee, and some of the other musicians way back in Glasgow. So what comes of that, I don't know. But yeah, there's all sorts of interesting possibilities and possible recording projects and things like that are going to be happening.
That gets me all kinds of excited. I love those projects. When it comes to, Fred Morrison getting together with some Appalachian banjo players, or, there have been a few books about that transatlantic crossing of music. Timothy Cummings gets into that. I just love that stuff so much. Bridging that gap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love what both of the artists you're talking about there. I love what they've done in that direction.
Yeah.
And I'm very into the kind of crossover there, and the kind of things in common as well. Being a traditional singer as well, and very aware of the links there between Appalachian and Scottish and sort of British Isles folk song more generally.
Yeah.
I really would love to explore that and get kind of close to that. Yeah, no, that's great, excellent. So that gives a few breadcrumbs for listeners to know what sort of thing might be coming next.
Yeah, perfect. I think I'll play us out to one of the collaborations you did with the system, the version 2 of the chanter with some other instruments. I think some of them were playing your bass whistle as well.
Excellent. Super. These from the videos, instrument sessions.
Yeah, I'll pull audio from